Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this Thursday, October 19th, 2017. My name is Frank Buquicchio, and I'm a partner here at Russo Law Group, and I'll be hosting tonight's webinar, which, as you can see, is entitled Estate Planning for Snowbirds. Also joining us tonight is Grace Marie Horan-Luce, who is a licensed representative from Senior Health Plan Specialist, and she's going to be talking about Medicare 2018. Hi, Grace.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you for coming. I always appreciate that people take time out of their personal time because it's nighttime, and this is not work time typically, so I really appreciate you're here, and I'm sure the audience is going to get a lot of great information today from you.
Right.
But before that, I have to address a few administrative items. The presentation will last approximately 1 hour. During this time, I'm sure you'll have questions. If you do, you can type them into the question pod, which is located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll try to address questions as we go along, but we'll also leave time at the end for a little Q&A. No question is unimportant, and we'll answer as many as time permits. Please note that we will be discussing financial and legal matters, and this program is not a substitute for obtaining professional financial and legal counsel. And at the end of the presentation, you'll see my contact information, some of which is on the screen now. We'll also have a slide up a little bit later on when Grace is presenting, and you'll have her contact information, so jot it down. And if you have any questions for either of us afterwards, feel free to contact us. We'll try to cover as much as we can tonight, but if we run out of time or if we can't answer a question for some reason, we can always get back to you. And finally, after the presentation ends, you're going to see a survey. Please take a minute or two to answer the survey questions. We actually read them, and we appreciate the feedback because it helps us develop and improve future webinars. All right, thanks again for joining us, and let's get started. Let's not get started because there we go. Okay, so what we'll cover today. Let me just hide this little screen over there. Okay, we're going to talk about the must-have legal documents. This is from my portion of the presentation. The must-have legal documents for both states. I know this is entitled Snowbirds, and I guess I shouldn't presume that that means Florida because I think that's kind of a general presumption, but we're going to talk primarily about Florida today as it relates to New York, primarily because Vincent Russo is admitted to practice in Florida, and we'll talk a little bit about this later too, that we can actually represent clients with regard to Florida documents and legal planning. Other states, you know, we'll call them, I guess, winter states, you know, down south and out west, Arizona and such. You know, I guess you can be a snowbird and go to one of those states, but we're going to concentrate today on New York and Florida. So we're going to talk about the must-have documents for both states. We'll talk about avoiding probate in multiple states. We'll talk about Medicaid benefits and what it means if you're going to be moving state to state, and a couple of other you know, things going on during the presentation. So the first part of the conversation, and anybody who's heard me speak before, because I do a lot of these things, I always work into any presentation, regardless of topic, the advanced directives, which are durable power of attorney and your healthcare directives. These documents, to me, I think are the most important documents that I could do for clients, because if you become unable to handle your own affairs, make health decisions for yourself, handle your finances, if you don't give somebody else that power, then somebody's going to end up in court, and there's going to be a guardianship proceeding, which is going to be timely, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and you're going to have a judge appointing who's going to be doing this for you. Or you can have a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy and appoint who you want and avoid all of that. So it's very important, I think, because if you become incapacitated, this is why you're alive. We're not talking about when you pass away. These are living documents. So if you become incapacitated, you're choosing who's going to handle your money. You're choosing who's going to talk to your doctors, as opposed to somebody else making that decision for you. So I think they're extremely important. When it comes to multiple states, so we have several clients, many clients who have, we'll call them snowbirds, I guess. We have who have either property here in New York and property in Florida, or they're in New York for the bulk of the year and they go down to Florida when it gets colder. Although I do have one client, interestingly, who does the reverse. She spends her summers in New York and her summers in Florida and her winters in New York. Yeah, and she said why. I don't remember exactly why. It was funny though. But most people do the other. When it gets colder up here, you know, around this time of year that's coming up, they go down south. And whether you own or not, if you spend what I'll say is a significant amount of time in another state, I think it makes sense to do two sets of documents. So these advanced directives, which are power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, are state driven. So each state may or may not, I should say, because not all states have laws for all of these documents. For example, New York does not have a living will law. We have a healthcare proxy law, but we don't have a living will law. The living will document is case law. And in Florida, they do have a living will law. So it's important, I think, if you're going to spend significant time in more than one state, to execute the documents for each state. So you could have, and I have many clients who I've done a New York power of attorney and healthcare proxy for, and I've also done a Florida power of attorney and healthcare proxy. So when they're down in Florida, they bring their Florida documents down there. They leave them down there if they have a place to leave them, so that if they're in Florida and something happens, they've got Florida documents that can be used for finances and healthcare decision making. And if they're in New York, the same. Does that necessarily mean that if somebody only has a New York healthcare proxy, for example, that it won't be recognized in Florida? No, it likely would be recognized in Florida, and the same with the power of attorney. So for somebody who's going to go down to Florida for a week, no, you're not going to do a Florida documents, or maybe even 2 weeks. I'm talking about somebody who's going to spend, a month, 2 months, 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 months in Florida. I would recommend that they execute advanced directives for both states. Revocable living trust. So this is not that this isn't a New York thing, revocable living trust, but revocable living trusts are extremely popular in Florida. And the primary reason is because probate is a pretty big deal in Florida. It's a little bit more complicated than it is here in New York and involved. So it's very common for Florida residents to set up revocable living trusts simply to avoid probate. I think the important thing from an estate planning standpoint is that revocable living trusts do not protect your assets. So if your goal is to protect assets, then a revocable living trust is not going to do it. There are other ways to avoid probate, for example, if you've got property in Florida, or if you're a resident of Florida. That would be an irrevocable trust. But revocable living trusts are very popular in Florida. We've done a bunch of them, and I know that I've met with clients who have relocated to New York. Grace and I were talking before we got on here tonight about how the healthcare up here, even though we probably don't really think of it, when you're in it, you don't really think about it. You have to have something to compare it to, right? So the healthcare here in New York is actually very good. And I went to a conference a number of years ago in Florida that was a national conference, but of course there were a lot of Florida elder law attorneys there. And they said that, kind of the running joke down there is that, people up north, i.e. New York, come down here for the warm weather, when they retire. And then when they get sick, they go back north, i.e. back to New York for the healthcare. So I've had many clients who were Florida residents, potentially even for years, and then moved back to New York. And I always review their documents. And many have had revocable trusts, set up to avoid probate. And I think that's important that if you do move from state to state, if you don't have, state-specific document, that you do have a local attorney review the documents, just in case anything needs to be tweaked to meet with the state law. Because I said these are state-driven documents. As far as your will goes, then the will needs to be prepared, as does a trust, under the laws of the state that you're domiciled in. So domicile is just a legal word. You can have multiple residences, but you can only have one domicile. I refer to domicile as the place you hang your hat. And we'll go into this a little bit more in terms of Florida in a minute. So, for example, like you can have a house in New York, you can have a house in Florida, you can have a condo in Arizona, but those are all residences. But you have to call one of them home for voting purposes, for registration of your car, for tax return purposes. You have to have only one domicile. So whatever state you're domiciled in, that's the law that you would be doing your will, for example, and your trust in. So if I have a Florida domiciliary, somebody who's domiciled in Florida but spends significant time here in New York, and I'm doing documents for them, I can do the advanced directives for both states, but the trust or the will is going to be done under Florida law. Okay. Just a reminder, I'm just going to check now. I'm going to check periodically this little question pod. If anybody has any questions, please type them in. And I think, hold on, let me see. I can read this one. Yeah, oh, it was just a comment. Okay. Not a question. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Oops. Okay. So I was just talking about the being a domiciliary in one state, and we have this this checklist of steps if you were to change your, so if you're a New York resident, for example, and you wanted to change your residence or domicile to be Florida, there are a number of ways to do it. You don't have to do every single one of them, but there are certain key elements to this. One would be a declaration of residence, for example, and using that address on all of your bills. And the idea is to show that you are a resident of that state. So obviously, if you're claiming that you're a Florida resident, but you're still using New York address for all of your mail and all of your bills and everything is being done through New York, it's really not going to look like you're a Florida resident if you want to try to take advantage of the Florida laws. So here's a checklist. It's a couple of pages, but this is actually taken right from our website. So if anybody wants to, because I'm not going to go through every single one of these, we just don't have the time. But if anybody wants to go through this, just log on to our website. And it's under, I think it's under the resources page. I should have looked before we got on. But I think it's under the resources page. You'll see it's called checklist for change of domicile. So you see right there, number one, file a Florida declaration of residence, declaration of domicile. That's in the local county. Each county in Florida has its own form, so it has to be filed with the county clerk's office. So just bear with me. I'm gonna skip ahead for a second because I got one off the internet. This one is from Miami-Dade County. So you see it's pretty straightforward. This is the whole thing. The bottom part is just for the notary, and the top part is the part that you would fill out. And it basically says that you were a resident of wherever, New York, and as of such and such a date, I now reside at wherever, Florida, and in this case, in Miami-Dade County, and that this is going to be your declaration that you're going to be a Florida resident, and you're going to vote there, and your license plates and all that stuff is going to be done through Florida. Okay, so that's kind of a pretty straightforward step when it comes to switching residence. The homestead exemption is big in Florida because in Florida the home is kind of like sacrosanct. So they have the homestead law to protect the homestead from any issues, especially long-term care issues. So that is sometimes enticing. There are of course there's tax reasons that people move to Florida. Not so much, it used to be an estate tax was a big reason, but the estate tax laws have changed rather significantly. New York is pretty much matched Florida at this point, so there's really no benefit there for moving here to there. So you see a couple others there. I mentioned registered to vote, selling New York residences if you're moving permanently, joining Florida clubs and societies. I guess if you're going to play golf, join a golf club. So going to back to the planning, what happens when there is no plan? Which unfortunately, it amazes me that I've been doing this for 25 years, and still I get people coming in and calling that don't even have a will or a power of attorney. I mean, it's with all the information out there, it's kind of interesting that that people are still kind of walking around, and I think maybe it's just because they haven't experienced anything significantly, thankfully, in their lives that have said, oh my gosh, I need to do this, and hopefully they don't wait for that. But everybody should have at least a basic plan, and more important, probably for people who are snowbirds and spending time between two states. So I mentioned probate before, and avoiding probate is big in Florida. But let's say you're a New York resident, where probate is not generally a big deal. It's still nice to avoid it, but it's not as onerous as it is in Florida. But let's say you're a New York resident, you've got a place in Florida as well. if you were to die owning those two residences, there's actually probate in both states potentially. And that's a problem because you have to, for example, if you're a New York resident, you first have to go, or your executor, wouldn't be you, of course, your executor first has to go through the probate process here in New York, and then also file a probate in the county of the property in Florida, which means what? Extra lawyer fees, extra court fees, and more delay. So, and we talked about probate being, a little bit more complicated in Florida. So if you've got, when we're talking about probate and in different seminars and avoiding probate, this is one of the indicators where avoiding probate is a good idea, is when you have property in more than one state. Again, the ongoing decision making, if you don't have the proper advance directives, the powers of attorney for financial matters, the healthcare proxy for healthcare decision making, and something happens to you, then somebody's going to have to go to court, as I said, and apply for guardianship. But now we have a question again between two states, in terms of where's the guardianship going to be held? Is it going to be in New York or is it going to be in Florida? And then additional taxes. Here, this I think is more of probably an income tax thing because of the income taxes here in New York versus the personal in Florida. All right, we're getting there. Excuse me. I should have got myself a glass of water before I started. All right, I just want to talk a little bit about Medicaid, and then we'll get Grace involved with the conversation here with Medicare. Hopefully, it's a nice segue. So, first of all, Medicaid benefits are not portable. So, Medicaid has rules state to state. It is a federal program, but it also has state and local parts to it. So, for example, even in New York, even though it's not supposed to be, Medicaid applications in Suffolk County are processed a little bit differently than they are in Nassau County and even in upstate counties. And that's just because counties, I guess, have different workloads and interpret, things differently. But it's not exact. They don't all do it the same. But in New York State, you're fine. So if you're a New York resident and you live in Suffolk County and you're on Medicaid and you move somewhere else, you keep your Medicaid benefits. But if you move to Florida, for example, or even if you're splitting time, the benefits are not portable. So you'd have to apply for Medicaid in Florida to get benefits down there. The thing in terms of services, though, and Grace and I were talking about this as well before, is that New York, I don't often use the words New York and generous in the same sentence, but when it comes to home care, help at home, New York has a pretty generous Medicaid program. There are a lot of states that have no home care program at all, and Florida's is extremely limited. There are waiting lists. It's very difficult to get care and get Medicaid down there at home. So if you need help at home, New York is the place to be, and applying for Medicaid here. But it's, as I said, it's not portable. And then we have to get into the asset protection discussion. Again, if somebody has property in multiple states, we can certainly put the property into a Medicaid asset protection trust, and that can be either New York or Florida. So if I have a New York resident, in fact, I've done it many times, but I just had it earlier this week. I had a client come in and sign their trust, and they have a condo in Florida and their home here in New York, and we put both of those into their New York, because they're New York residents, into their New York Medicaid asset protection trust to protect the assets in case either of them need nursing home care in the future because of the 5-year look back. So, all right, let me check. I'm going to check before I let Grace go. Let me just check. Whoops. One more time on the questions. All right, none. If you have any questions, remember, question pod on the right. Okay, so we're about 25 after 7, so we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, so that's good. This way I can give Grace maybe a little bit more time, because she's got a lot of information, and Grace usually talks for like an hour or two about these things, right, Grace? When you're talking about the ways you can help people, because there's so much information. But unfortunately, we don't have that kind of time. But Grace and I have spoken together before. She's great. She knows her stuff. I've referred clients to her because when it comes to Medicare, I know some of this stuff, but I don't do any of the things that Grace does. So maybe Grace, just tell us a little bit about what what you do and what you can do for clients in terms of Medicare benefits.
I'm a life and health broker. My agency and myself, we specialize in Medicare. We do Medicare all year long. So Medicare is a wonderful system if you learn how to navigate it. You just have to use the different choices that are out there for you to navigate what is the right one for you. Seniors have a hard time deciphering to separate. Once you go into Medicare, a husband and wife are no longer on the same plan. There's many choices out there. In Suffolk County right now, there's about 29 managed care plans and 23 drug plans here and 10 different supplemental plans. And Frank and myself were talking, I also do Florida. Florida has many more options in the managed care world than New York even has. So it's wonderful. You just have to learn how to navigate it and utilize it. There's a difference between New York and Florida. New York does not do underwriting when it comes to your supplemental plans, where Florida does underwriting. They go by your age, your health, male, female. So things are quite differently done. When someone's a New York resident and they're relocating to Florida, we will put them in a supplemental plan here, because a supplemental plan or a Medigap may not take them when they get to Florida due to their health condition or age. So you just have to learn how to navigate it. Right now is open enrollment for seniors between October 15th and December 7th throughout the whole United States. That's when the senior has the opportunity to change their drug plan and their managed care, their HMO, PPO plans. And the thing that you were looking for at this time of year is, has the formulary for my drugs changed? Has the company that I'm dealing with no longer have that drug in their formulary, which means it will cost me more money and it will be hard to get it covered? HMO, PPO, same thing. Are the drugs in there? Has the plan gone up with premium? Are my doctors still in it? That's what you're looking for at this time of year. Another question that people are unaware of that's usually asked when I do presentations, if you have a Medigap or a supplement, you can change that anytime, any month for the first of the month. They do not follow these rules. So if you're interested or you do have a Medigap or a supplemental plan, you can change it as your health changes. So it doesn't have anything to do with, I can only do it between October 15th and December 7th every year. Another thing that I would like to talk about for New York residents, as we were saying, New York has wonderful assistant programs. New York has a pharmaceutical assistant program called EPIC, which is only in this state. We are one of the few states that assist the seniors in the cost of their medications. EPIC qualifications is income-based. If a couple is making under $100,000, they qualify, and if a single is making under $75,000, they qualify. If someone is using VA benefits, they cannot join EPIC. If someone is in a federal or a state program through the government, they do not qualify for EPIC. If somebody does have a plan through work, like through a union, if it has a Medicare symbol on it and it's a Medicare group program, you may qualify for it. So it's income-based. So say someone's making $50,000 as a couple. They may say, we need you to spend about $750 each year on medications, and now we will knock your copays down, and we will assist you with your medications.
So those are, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but those are pretty high limits, right? I mean, not a whole lot of seniors that make, married senior making $100,000 a year. Right?
About 3 years ago, it was $50,000 for a couple and $35,000 for a single. In New York, that's very low, and nobody was utilizing it, so they upped it.
Good.
Yes,
that's great. That's great. I didn't realize that the levels were so high.
yes. So everybody should have EPIC. It doesn't cost anything. If you are lower income, EPIC will actually help pay your premium and knock your copays down. So it's something that I really always talk about, no matter where I am. Even if I'm given 5 minutes, I talk about EPIC. Also with EPIC, the seniors do have the opportunity for me to move out of that HMO, a PPO, or drug plan anytime during the year. Once they can move out of a plan if the plan is hurting them. As example would be a new medication that is not covered under the drug plan you're in, or if you're in an HMO, I want to go to, in New York, we all know Sloan Kettering. Sloan Kettering does not take many HMOs, so someone may want to go back into original Medicare. this allows me to do that for them by the 1st of the next month. So if someone has that plan and they've chosen to be in an HMO, which might have a limited network if they wanted to go out of state, that opportunity is there. That's why I like people to be in it. It's just an assistance program. Como's grandmother worked very hard because seniors weren't able to get their medication. This is a way to make sure you get your medications for people.
So that's why I refer people to you, because all that stuff that she just said, that's all like the dates and the once a year and this open enrollment period. I mean, that's too much for me to remember, frankly.
And I don't know Medicaid.
Right.
That's
so,
not my area.
I mean, right. I do the documents. I mean, I know what, obviously I know about Medicare and I know a good amount about it and the rehabilitation, all that, but the plans and the formulas, then
No.
who takes what? No, that's where you come in.
There's a lot of assistance. Anybody can go on Medicare.gov.
Right.
That's what a person like myself goes. You put in your zip code, you put in your pharmacies. Changing pharmacies makes a big difference. That can change numbers a lot. So every year at this time of year, October 1st is when all the formularies change. And this year the drugs are pretty bad. I will see sometimes my agency, we actually check our clients every year. Somebody comes in and runs them through for us. And sometimes I'll see $500 to $1,000 difference. And if you don't check that, you will have to pay that when you get to the pharmacy in January.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit before, but I don't know if everybody knows what the formulary is. What is that? What does that mean?
Formulary is what tier your drugs are. So it's not that the company does it on purpose on you. They're cost sharing. They no longer have a deal with that company. So it might be a tier 1 when you joined last year. The next year it might be a tier 3, which is a brand name drug. So now they don't have a deal, you don't have a deal. So you need to go to a company that has a deal with that drug company. That's what you're looking for. Who has the best deal for your medications to save money?
So does it happen where sometimes where you may find where if somebody's on multiple medications, let's say, they're not all covered in the same formulary?
No, you're trying to find, they're all different tiers. Tiers
Okay.
go 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's generic, non-preferred, generic brand, non-preferred brand, and specialty. So if we're looking for the most expensive drug, who has the deal with your most expensive
Right.
drug is really what we're looking for. And sometimes, I mean, I have clients get 7 medications and get them all for free because with the right company. It's all looking who has the deal. And one of the companies actually owns a pharmacy. So if they're making your medication and you do mail order, you will get it for free. Everybody needs to go to a preferred pharmacy. No matter what insurance, everybody has a preferred pharmacy. If you go to the pharmacy you want to and not their preferred, you spend 20% more on your medications. And that can add up. A cheap drug, maybe not. An expensive one, it can.
So is there such thing as a cheap drug?
A drug that's free is cheap.
That's true.
There are free
Right.
drugs. There are generics that are free. One company does select 6. They choose 5 medications that seniors all use that are generic, and they give them for free.
Okay.
So there is. Diabetes medicine is expensive. On the Medicare.gov site, it also will tell you if there's assistance for your medications. Some expensive medications, there is assistance. You can get it for free. You do have to put in an application. It's income-based, about $89,000 for a couple, and in the high 30s for a single. I have my clients usually write a letter saying it's a little worse than it is, and they're looking at everybody. Maybe that letter gets you the income, gets you the assistance.
Right.
And then if you get that medicine for free, then we can look at another company for you, and you're not spending as much money.
Right. Awesome. So I know when I do either presentations or when I'm meeting with somebody, they want to know what it's going to cost for me to help them. What does it cost to help somebody with
There is
the
no
Medicare
fee
process?
to have a representative help you. We are paid by commission by the company if you sign up. So the thing I tell people usually, if you're choosing someone to assist you, if you call the company up on the phone, they only know their company. It's not their job to tell you that there's 5 other companies or 20 other companies out there. You want somebody who represents more than one company, which is what we do. We represent about 20 different companies, and we have the unbiased opinion as to which is the right one for you. And honestly, if you're sent to a different drug company, we tell you what to say when you call up on the phone, because it's not worth spending $500. We would not do that to you.
Right.
So you just have to educate yourself, and people are being more educated and coming and doing, informational research on their own in order to save money.
I think that's important because, when I talk about long-term care insurance, sometimes to clients, which I don't sell, but I always tell them, look, you want to go to somebody who represents multiple companies, right? You don't want to go to somebody who's going to be locked. I'll use MetLife just as an example.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a MetLife broker and all he or she can do is present MetLife products, they're going to try to force you into the MetLife product.
Same.
Where maybe there are other products out there that are better, but they can't sell it, and they're certainly not going to share it with you,
Right.
obviously, right? So that's great.
It's your job as a consumer
Right.
to do the research on your own.
Right. So you see Grace's information there. Please feel free, her number, her email. You heard how awesome she is. She knows this stuff. And I would highly recommend, if you have any questions about the Medicare process, give Grace a call. All right, I'm going to check a couple more slides. Let me just check the Q&A box. Oh, we have a comment. Somebody's loving it. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. You'll remain nameless. I can say your first name. Her name is Beth. Thanks, Beth. Okay. We're going to have another minute or two, so if you have any questions, we'll do a last call. So in our office, we call it peace of mind and an action plan. We always, we're planners. We always want people to act and not sit around and wait for things to happen. So first, of course, is to retain the services of an experienced attorney who cares about you. And the second, obviously, would be to implement a plan to protect your assets, or if you have a plan, update it. I mean, that's part of what we do is meet with people. I just met with somebody today, and she wanted me to review what she had to see if it was still sufficient. Her power of attorney is from 1989, and her will, I think, was from 1989 as well. They were valid, but they were severely outdated. Laws have changed, and I explained to her why she needed to redo and get her power of attorney current. Her will is actually okay, but it still needed to be updated. So, of course, we'd love for you to call us for a meeting. We have a lot of information on our website. Marissa, I noticed, sent me a little note while we were talking that domicile checklist. I forgot, and I'm sorry, Marissa, but thank you for telling me that we have a fairly new page on our website. So when I was talking about the domicile checklist, it's on the estate planning for Snowbirds page.
Oh.
Kind of obvious, right? So that's something, in my defense, that's something that we just added to our website recently, but it's there. We have a page for estate planning for Snowbirds on our website, so check that out. eBlast you can enroll on our website as well, and programs like this are all free all the time. Contact information is there, as I mentioned before. I'll come back to that. It'll be there again. We only do a limited number of service areas. We don't dabble in a bunch of things. We are concentrated in what we do. Estate planning, healthcare, decision-making, estate administration, Medicaid planning. Vince Russo literally wrote the book in New York. So we're highly focused on what we do. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, especially Grace.
Thank you for having
I
me.
appreciate it, Grace, and I'm sure we'll have you back if it's okay with you.
I'd love to.
If you have any additional questions, you can email them to our email address, which is info@vjrussolaw.com. We have a lot of really great seminars and webinars coming up, and you can view the schedule on our website, which is there on the screen. And as a reminder, please take a minute to fill out the survey that's going to pop up after the webinar has ended. We really appreciate the feedback. Hope everyone has a great night. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.